The champagne flutes clinked like glass dominoes falling in slow motion. From the rooftop of the Lakeview Grand Hotel, the entire skyline of Chicago glowed under a velvet night. It should have felt victorious. Ethan Rourke had just closed the most aggressive acquisition in his firm's history, an effortless win, like most things in his life. And yet, as he leaned on the sleek glass railing, watching the reflection shimmer over the rooftop pool, all he felt was static. "You look like a man who just got bored of winning," came a familiar voice from behind him. Ethan turned slightly, recognizing Chase Alden, his oldest friend and occasional moral antagonist. Chase had that half-smirk on his face, the kind that always preceded something stupid or brilliant or both. "Maybe I am bored," Ethan replied, swirling the amber in his glass. "Even victory feels predictable now." "Perfect," Chase said, stepping beside him. "Then I have a wager to shake things up, a real challenge." Ethan raised a brow, skeptical. "This isn't Vegas, Chase." Chase grinned. "No, this one's personal. I bet you $2 million that you won't marry a woman. Not your type." "My type? You know, slim. Conventionally hot, glossy, interchangeable. Basically, your dating history." Ethan laughed. It was sharp and unamused. "What's the catch? You marry someone I choose, not for show. 6 months. Real commitment. Real cohabitation. If you make it through, you win. Walk away richer and undefeated, as usual. And if I lose, you prove you're just as shallow as the world thinks you are." Ethan stared at him. 2 million meant nothing to him. But the dare, the gauntlet, that spark in Chase's eyes. He extended his hand. "Deal." Glasses touched. Bet sealed. 3 days later, Chase sent an email, no words, just an attachment, Marla Jameson. Ethan clicked. The photo wasn't what he expected. She was not thin, not sculpted or curated like the women in his circles, but she carried herself with a calm, proud presence. Voluminous curls framed a face that didn't smile to please. Her body was full, her dress simple, but her eyes, dark, focused, quietly defiant, held the room in place. There was no "look at me" in that photo, just "I see you," and that unnerved him. Intrigued him. They met at the Dorian, a fine dining fortress Ethan had taken dozens of women to, each one dressed to impress, each conversation choreographed to flirt, flatter, and fold. Marla was different. She arrived on time, in a burgundy dress that hugged her curves unapologetically. She didn't look around in awe, didn't hesitate. She walked in like she belonged because she did. "You're Ethan Rourke," she said as she sat down, voice level and cool. "And you must be Marla Jameson," he replied, extending a hand. She looked at it for 2 seconds, then shook it. Her grip was firm, grounded, like she was giving him exactly as much power as she chose. "No need to pretend," she said, pouring herself water. "I know about the bet." Ethan blinked. He hadn't expected that. He kept his expression composed. "And you still came?" he asked. "I'm curious," she said simply. "I want to see what a man who marries on a dare thinks he's getting into." That should have bruised his ego. Somehow it didn't. "What do you want out of it?" he asked. Marla leaned back slightly, measuring him. "Nothing you can buy. Here are my terms. No intimacy. No fake couple appearances. No playing house. I keep my life, my job, my space. You keep yours. 6 months. I walk when the clock runs out. No strings." Her voice was steady. Her rules were clear. She wasn't asking. She was stating. Ethan considered her for a long beat. Most people bent to his presence. She didn't even flinch. "Agreed," he said. They clinked glasses. No toasts, no smiles. But as she stood to leave, Ethan watched her walk away with a strange tightness in his chest. The woman he thought he'd be manipulating had just flipped the board, and for the first time in years, he didn't know the rules. The marriage certificate sat on the table like a dare scrawled in ink. Ethan Rourke stared at it, then at the woman across from him, Marla Jameson, calm as still water, unmoved by the setting, by him, by the entire charade. City Hall in Chicago wasn't glamorous, but Ethan had pulled strings to make their appointment. Swift and private. No press. No entourage. Just the legal proof of a bet neither of them had forgotten. The officiant read through the vows. Ethan's hand didn't shake. Marla's eyes didn't blink. When it was over, they both signed. No ring exchange. No kiss. "Congratulations," the clerk said with a polite nod, clearly confused by the silence. Marla turned to Ethan. "That's it. We're married. Looks like it," he said, tucking the certificate into his briefcase like a contract closing. "You hungry?" She gave a half smile. "Not for overpriced foie gras, if that's what you were thinking." They ended up at a small diner by the lake, the kind with linoleum floors and real pie under glass domes. It was her choice. Ethan had agreed, curious again. She ordered a grilled cheese. He got black coffee and nothing else. "You don't eat. Real food?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "I eat when I'm not being judged for it." "I'm not judging. I'm observing," she said, picking at her sandwich. "There's a difference." Ethan leaned back. "Why'd you agree to this?" Marla chewed, then answered without looking at him. "Because I wanted to know what a man like you does when someone won't play by his script." "You think I have a script?" "I think you have a script for everything," she said, wiping her hands, "including marriage. And your role in this? I'm the part of the story you can't write." There was no flirtation in her tone, no edge, just truth, and it unnerved him. The penthouse was immaculate, floor-to-ceiling windows framed. The skyline like a painting that changed with the weather. Marble counters, steel appliances, everything sleek, cold, expensive. Ethan opened the door. "Welcome to your temporary home." Marla walked in slowly, scanning the space like a museum. Visitor, not in awe but in analysis. "Impressive," she said finally. "Cold, but impressive." He watched her as she walked across the living room and set her bag down without asking. Not a word about the view. Not a comment on the custom-built furniture or the grand piano that had never been played. Instead, she pulled a folded piece of paper from her purse and handed it to him. Ethan unfolded it. A list. Rules. Her terms. No physical contact unless explicitly agreed upon. Separate rooms. No interference in her work, schedule, or social life. No media appearances. As a couple, she could leave at any time without explanation. At the bottom she had scrawled, "You accepted the bet. These are the conditions." Ethan read the list twice, then looked up at her. "You do know this makes you sound like a lawyer. I take contracts seriously." He nodded slowly, then handed the paper back. "I can live with this. I hope." "So," she said, already heading down the hall, "because I don't plan on repeating myself." Days passed in an unusual rhythm. Marla was up before him, out of the apartment by 8 a.m., back by 7. She worked as a public librarian of all things. Ethan had expected, he didn't know what, someone who might quit, lounge, spend. Instead, she packed lunch in a brown paper bag. She took the subway, she lived, and not once did she ask him for anything. He noticed her habits. She brewed strong coffee, no sugar every morning. She took off her shoes at the door. She had a stack of mystery novels she rotated every week. On Sunday afternoons, she played vinyl records, jazz mostly, on a player she brought herself. Ethan, in turn, tried to maintain distance. He worked longer hours, hosted fewer meetings at home, but the space felt changed. It wasn't her presence. It was her lack of need. Women had always drifted into his life with expectations, attention, gifts, power, proximity. Marla didn't even seem to notice the world he'd built. Once he left a Cartier box on the kitchen island, a pair of earrings, nothing showy but elegant. That night, it was back in the same spot. Unopened, a post-it stuck to it read, "Nice try." Not interested. He had to laugh. One evening, a knock came on his study door. Marla poked her head in. "I'm making pasta," she said. "Don't worry, I'm not trying to be domestic, just hungry." "I don't cook," he said. "Didn't ask you to." Still, 15 minutes later, he found himself in the kitchen. She didn't offer a plate. He didn't ask, but they ate in silence at the counter, the city lights painting shadows across her face. "You ever do anything just for the hell of it?" she asked suddenly. He looked at her. "Like this bet?" "No. I mean, with no outcome, no win, no leverage. Just because." He hesitated, then shook his head. "Didn't think so," she said, almost to herself. That silence stretched again, but this time it didn't feel cold. It felt like ground softening before a storm. The penthouse hadn't changed. Not really. Everything remained, where it had always been, the minimalist glass sculpture in the foyer, the steel gray sectional no one ever sat on, the untouched dining table made for 10, though Ethan had never hosted more than 2 at once. His world was one of curated precision and ambient silence until she arrived. Now small disruptions had started to appear. At first he dismissed them, a pair of beat-up Converse left by the door, a well-worn tote bag slung on the kitchen chair. A stack of library books balanced precariously on the edge of the coffee table. She never asked permission to place them. She didn't need to. It wasn't chaos. It was lived in. And Ethan didn't know whether it annoyed or unsettled him more. But what really got to him, what he couldn't quite explain, was the vase. It appeared one Friday afternoon. He came home from a grueling pitch meeting, and there it was, a short ceramic vase, glazed in faded cobalt, sitting on the marble island like it belonged there. Inside it were peonies, full, unapologetically lush peonies. Blush pink, a few petals, already beginning to fall. He hadn't seen fresh flowers in this apartment since his assistant accidentally sent a congratulatory bouquet to the wrong address. Ethan stared at them like they were a foreign object. "What's this?" he asked that evening, nodding toward the vase as Marla breezed into the kitchen. She didn't glance at it. "They're flowers, Ethan. Try not to panic." "I mean, why?" She shrugged, opening the fridge. "I like them, and your kitchen was starting to feel like a surgical suite." "You brought them here?" "I paid for them, if that's what you're asking." Her tone wasn't defensive, it was dismissive, which felt worse. "You're really not impressed by all this, are you?" he asked, gesturing around. Marla turned to face him, her hand still on the fridge door. "It's a very nice cage, Ethan," she said calmly. "But I don't live for chandeliers. I don't need a skyline to feel like I exist." Then she closed the fridge, took a bottle of sparkling water, and left the room. And for a long moment, Ethan stood there, staring at the peonies, wondering why his own space suddenly felt like someone else's truth. The next morning he woke to the sound of jazz, real jazz, not smooth radio noise but crackling, unpredictable vinyl. Marla had set up her record player in the corner of the living room, right next to the books she rotated weekly. He didn't stop her. Couldn't, even if he wanted to. Instead, he watched. He watched how she moved around his apartment with the quiet assurance of someone who wasn't performing. She didn't try to impress. She didn't play the game. She didn't need him, and somehow, that was more seductive than anyone who ever had. He caught himself studying her. The way she tied her hair up with a pen while reading, how she hummed to herself when cooking, the tiny smiles she made when something in a book surprised her. It was maddening, because it made her real. And Ethan Rourke had never been good with real. That afternoon, he found himself pacing in his office, unable to focus on the quarterly review documents in front of him. Marla had refused the Cartier earrings, ignored the Hermes scarf, even the curated gourmet pantry. Imported teas, handmade pastas, she had labeled overpriced nonsense. It was like money passed through her, no weight, no traction. He couldn't bribe her, he couldn't outcharm her, and it wasn't just the bet anymore. He wanted to be noticed. That thought startled him. Ethan Rourke didn't need validation from anyone, especially not a woman he was supposed to outlast for 6 months. But here he was, watching her reflection in the hallway mirror, as she headed out for work, jeans, hoodie, hair still damp from the shower, and feeling something he couldn't name, something that gnawed, Was it respect? Frustration? Desire? All of the above? On Sunday, she made pancakes. Ethan hadn't eaten a real breakfast since college. He walked into the kitchen in a tailored t-shirt and joggers, finding her flipping batter in a skillet that looked laughably domestic in the designer kitchen. "You're cooking again?" "Shocking, I know," she replied. "I eat, occasionally, and since I'm not allergic to eggs or butter, here we are." She slid a plate toward him. No fork, no eye contact. He took it. It was good. Better than good. They sat at the island, not talking, chewing in parallel. The sunlight spilled through the windows like honey, warm and soft, making the steel surfaces of the penthouse seem less sterile. He looked at her, not in the quick appraising way he had with other women, not measuring, just looking. And he wondered, briefly, what it would have been like to meet her outside of this stupid wager, to have found her in a bookstore, or a park, or at some event where neither of them had anything to prove. But this wasn't that. And he had made this bed. The timer in his head ticked down. 5 months, 3 weeks, and for the first time, he wasn't so sure he wanted her to walk away when it ran out. Ethan's phone buzzed as the elevator opened directly into the penthouse. He didn't need to check it. He already knew what it said. The press had caught wind of the board's decision and they were running with it. Layoffs, downsizing, another strategic pivot, 100 employees let go. Stock up 3 points. Ethan loosened his tie as he stepped inside. The apartment was quiet, save for the soft crackle of Marla's record player spinning something slow and melancholy. He wanted silence, but the music wrapped around him like fog. Too personal. Too present. "Rough day at the office?" came Marla's voice from the living room. He looked up. She was on the couch, legs tucked under her, a book resting face down on her lap. She didn't get up. He gave a non-answer. "Just business." She tilted her head. "Business that got 2 of my friends fired?" Ethan froze. "Your friends?" "Yeah. Sadie in marketing, Hassan in DevOps, both gone. No warning." Her voice was calm, too calm. "Marla, it wasn't personal." "No, of course not." She stood now slowly. "Because in your world, it never is." The air thickened. "I make decisions that protect the company," Ethan said evenly. "Every CEO has to. You say that like it's a badge of honor. It's reality." "No, it's cowardice," she said, sharper now. "You hide behind profit margins and power plays and call it leadership." He crossed his arms. "You don't know what it's like to carry $1 billion company on your back." "I don't," she agreed. "But I know what it's like. To be dismissed by people who think their empire is more important than human lives." Ethan bristled. "You knew what this was. You agreed to the terms. You said you didn't care about my world." "I don't care about your world." She snapped. "I care about the people in it, and I care about what it's turning you into." That stopped him. He expected many things from Marla. Sarcasm, resistance, indifference, but not this. Not disappointment. "I'm not changing," he said, quieter. "Exactly," she replied. The silence after that was louder than the music still playing. He didn't sleep that night. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling while the city buzzed below. The image of her standing in the living room, fire in her eyes, truth in her voice, kept replaying. She wasn't yelling to prove a point. She was speaking like someone who had stopped believing he could be better. That was worse. By morning, she was gone, again out early for work, and the apartment felt unfamiliar. The peonies had started to wilt. One petal had dropped onto the counter, curling in on itself. He sat at the island, coffee untouched, and wondered how the hell she got to him like this. That afternoon, he called Chase. "I think I screwed up." Chase laughed. "You say that like it's rare. I mean with her." A pause. Then, "Oh. So this isn't about losing the bet anymore." Ethan didn't answer. Chase whistled. "Let me guess. She's not impressed by your money, she sees through your bullshit, and she's making you feel, what's the word, human?" "She called me a coward," Ethan muttered. "And you're calling me why?" Because I don't want to lose. You mean the woman or the bet? This time, Ethan paused. Chase sighed. You were never playing the game, Ethan. You were the one being played. That night, Ethan waited for Marla. He didn't know what he was going to say. Apologies had always come easy when they cost him nothing. But this one wasn't just about right or wrong. It was about value. And for the first time, he didn't want to be right. He wanted to be worth something to her. She came home, late, hair wine-tousled, coat slung over one shoulder. Her expression was unreadable as she stepped inside. You're still up, she said, surprised. I was waiting. For what? Ethan stood. To say something I should have said yesterday. She leaned against the doorframe, arms folded. Go ahead. He took a breath. I don't regret being a strategist, but I regret forgetting what the cost feels like for people who don't get parachutes. Marla said nothing. I don't expect forgiveness, he added. But I wanted you to know I heard you, and I'm trying to care. Her eyes softened, just slightly. Try harder, she said. Then she walked past him, heading to her room. But for the first time in days, Ethan didn't feel the slam of a door. He felt a window crack open. For once, Ethan didn't wake up to an empty apartment. The smell of coffee reached him first. Strong, dark, no sugar. Her way. The kind he used to think was for people trying too hard to prove they were awake. Now he found himself craving it. He stepped into the kitchen, expecting to see her reading at the counter as usual. But Marla wasn't there. Instead, there was a mug waiting on the island. Beside it, a folded note on a torn piece of paper towel. Didn't want to wake you. Coffee's hot. Try not to ruin it with almond milk. He stared at the note longer than he needed to, then picked up the mug and took a sip. It was bitter, honest, exactly like her. That morning, Ethan did something strange. He opened his calendar and canceled 2 back-to-back boardroom meetings. He rescheduled a lunch with an investor. Then, for the first time in months, he pulled up the directory for Rourke Dynamics and scrolled through the names, not the executives, not the partners. The people buried 5 clicks deep. Sadie Nguyen, former marketing. Let go last week. Hassan Malik, systems developer. Gone too. He read their profiles. He remembered. None of them. Not their work, not their faces. The guilt crept in quietly. Not crushing. Just persistent. Like background noise you can't unhear once you've noticed it. He opened a new email, then another. By noon, he was standing at a food truck. Marla had once mentioned a small black-owned pop-up on the corner of Jackson and Wells. Best grilled cheese in Chicago, she'd said, like it was a fact written in the city's constitution. He ordered 2. One classic, one with jalapenos, just in case she felt bold. She wasn't expecting him at the library. The look on her face when he walked in holding paper bags was priceless. You're stalking me now? She asked, arching an eyebrow from behind the front desk. Feeding you, he said. And maybe bribing you a little. She crossed her arms. I told you I don't take bribes. Then call it a peace offering. A pause. Then, does it have pickles? He smiled. Always. They sat in the staff lounge, fluorescent lights overhead, the hum of old air vents filling the space. The grilled cheese was messy. Perfect. Ethan hadn't eaten in a break room. Since grad school, he found he didn't mind it. So, she said between bites, what's the catch? No catch. Just wanted to say thanks. For what? For not letting me off easy. She looked at him, surprised. Most men hate that about me. I did, he admitted. But now, I think it might be the only reason I'm still thinking. Marla didn't reply, but something in her face shifted. Less guarded, still skeptical, but warmer. He didn't push. He'd learned not to. Over the next few days, something changed, not with declarations, not with dramatic gestures, with small things. Ethan started reading the headlines she left on the kitchen table. He brewed her coffee when she was running late. He stopped working from the penthouse, giving her space instead of lurking. He left, a book on her side table, one she'd mentioned weeks ago but hadn't had time to track down. No note. No expectation. She didn't say anything when she saw it, but the next morning he noticed it had moved from the table to her bag. She was reading it. One evening, he found her in the living room, curled up in a fleece blanket, watching a documentary on climate policy. Not exactly his genre, but he sat down beside her. Not too close. Just near enough to share the space. "Want wine?" he asked. "Depends. Are you pouring or proposing?" He smiled. "Pouring, for once," she nodded. "Red. Nothing too fancy." He brought the wine. They drank in silence. 15 minutes in, she asked, "Why now?" He didn't pretend to misunderstand. "Because I'm tired of being the guy who wins everything but means nothing." Marla looked at him, and this time she didn't look through him. Later that night, as she rinsed her glass in the kitchen, Ethan lingered in the hallway, watching her, noticing things he hadn't before. The way she tucked her hair behind her ear when focused. The tiny scar on her wrist, half hidden by her bracelet. The way she wiped down the counter even though it was already clean. She caught him staring. "What?" He shrugged. "I don't know, you just fit here." "In your penthouse," she teased. "In my life." She froze. Not offended. Not swooning. Just still. "You don't know my whole story," she said softly. "I want to," he replied. And for once, she didn't walk away. It rained the next night. Not a dramatic storm, not the kind that made headlines. Just the steady, soaking kind that tapped the windows and wrapped the city in a gray hush. The kind of rain that made people stay quiet. And listen, Ethan found Marla on the balcony barefoot, a hoodie pulled over her head, her hands wrapped around a mug that had long gone cold. He stood at the doorway, uncertain. Then, without a word, stepped out and joined her. The concrete under. His feet was damp and the air smelled of metal and memory. "Didn't peg you for the dramatic thinker type," he said, his voice low. "I'm full of surprises," she replied. They stood in silence. The city pulsed below, headlights gliding, down wet streets, but up here it was still, like they were standing in a pause. After a while she spoke. "You've been good lately," he blinked. "Thanks. I mean, you haven't tried to win. You've just shown up." "That's new for me," he admitted. She glanced at him. "Why now?" "Because I think I stopped needing to prove anything, and I started wanting to understand." Marla sipped the last of her cold tea. "Then maybe you're ready to hear the part I didn't tell you." He looked at her fully now. Her face in the shadows, her voice steady but quieter than usual. "I didn't agree to this bet just to challenge you," she said. "There was more to it. There's always more." Ethan waited. "You remember how I said I didn't care about your money?" He nodded. "I meant it. But what I didn't say is, your company, Rourke Dynamics, it wasn't some faceless machine. To me, it's part of how I lost something I'll never get back." Her hands tightened slightly around the mug. "My father ran a small design consultancy. Mid-tier clients. Tight margins. But it was his. It was everything he had." She took a breath. "Then you bought the agency his biggest client was working with, killed the contract, consolidated in-house. My dad lost his anchor. The next 6 months, we watched the lights go out, one by one. I was still in college. He drained his retirement just to keep payroll running." Ethan's throat went dry. "He never blamed you out loud, but I saw it. I saw what it did to him. The man who used to fix everything couldn't fix himself." "What happened?" Ethan asked, though he was already afraid to hear the answer. "One night he drove to the lake," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Didn't come back." Silence fell heavy. "I'm so sorry," Ethan said, and for the first time, it wasn't reflex. It was real. A weight in his chest. "I don't tell people that," she said. "Most just pity you, or spin it into some life lesson. I didn't want your pity. I wanted your awareness." He didn't move. He didn't reach. For her. He just stood beside her, letting the truth settle in. And then she added, almost as an afterthought, I was pregnant at the time. Stress. Grief. I lost it 2 weeks later. Ethan felt something inside him fracture. He wanted to say something. Anything. But there was no sentence. No apology that could touch the kind of hurt she'd carried alone. You've been carrying that, he said quietly. People carry worse. But you carried it alone. I stopped expecting anyone else to hold it, and somehow, that broke him more than the story itself. He didn't cry. He didn't fall apart. But something inside shifted, permanently. Thank you for telling me, he said. She looked at him. I didn't do it for your forgiveness. No. I didn't do it to justify a bet either. I know. I did it because maybe you're finally someone who needs to know the whole story before you decide who someone is. Ethan nodded slowly. I was the kind of man who never asked, who never saw. I see that now. She didn't answer. But she didn't walk away, either. They stood there side by side, letting the city rain cleanse something between them, not erasing the past, but maybe softening its grip. When they finally went inside, she didn't say goodnight. She just turned down the hallway, his hallway, and paused. If you ever use this to feel sorry for me, she said without turning, I'll pack my things and walk. I won't, he promised. She nodded once and disappeared into the dark. Ethan sat alone in the kitchen that night, the rain still ticking against the glass. He didn't drink. He didn't check his phone. He didn't make plans. He just sat, with the weight of her truth, and realized for the first time he was falling in love with someone who didn't need him, and he didn't want to be her savior. He just wanted to be worthy. The next morning, Ethan made a decision. No speeches, no grand gestures, no declarations of guilt or love. If he was going to be the man Marla could forgive, not for her, but because of her, he needed to start showing up in the places that mattered. He started with Hassan. It took him 3 days to track him down. Chicago's tech world wasn't small, and most people who'd left Rourke Dynamics didn't want to be found by its CEO. When he finally got Hassan to agree to meet for coffee, the man arrived with a stiff jaw and arms crossed over a faded hoodie. Didn't expect to ever hear from you, Hassan said. I didn't come to offer a job, Ethan replied. Or an excuse. Then why? To tell you I was wrong. Hassan blinked, caught off guard. I signed off on a restructure that wiped out half your department because it looked clean on a spreadsheet. You weren't a number. You were a human. And I forgot that. For a moment, Hassan just stared at him. Then he gave a tight nod. Took you long enough. I know. They talked for 20 minutes. It wasn't warm, but it wasn't hostile. When they parted ways, Ethan felt something settle in his chest, not relief. Just alignment. He did the same with Sadie, then with 3 other names that had haunted the corners of his inbox since the layoffs. He didn't tell Marla. Not yet. The penthouse was quieter these days, but the silence no longer gnawed. Marla still kept her distance, still retreated to her room, still guarded her evenings like sacred ground. But the tension was different now, less like stone, more like a curtain slowly being drawn open. She noticed the small things, like when he started walking to the corner bodega instead of ordering groceries through his assistant, or when he replaced the custom wine fridge with an old wooden bookshelf she'd admired in a vintage shop. He didn't tell her it had taken him 3 phone calls and a bribe to the store owner to get it delivered before she came home. She simply walked in one night, saw it standing there, already half filled with books, and said, "Good taste. Finally." One evening she came home and found him standing at the stove. "I didn't know you knew what a sauté pan was," she said, kicking off her shoes. "I Googled how to not burn garlic," Ethan replied. "You're evolving." He handed her a glass of wine. "I'm trying." They ate in silence. Pasta. A little overcooked, but she didn't complain. Afterward, she sat on the couch and picked up one of the books from the new shelf. Ethan stood behind the island, drying, dishes by hand. Something about the rhythm soothed him. When she spoke, it was without warning. Hassan told me you reached out. He looked up, carefully. Yeah. And Sadie. I didn't do it to impress you. I know. She didn't say thank you. She didn't have to. The next night, she found him sitting on the floor of the living room, sorting through old photo boxes he hadn't touched in years. I didn't peg you for a scrapbooker, she said. He held up a photo. He was 15, hair too long, standing beside a man in a mechanic's jumpsuit. His father. A man he hadn't mentioned once since Marla moved in. I used to think success meant leaving this version of myself behind, Ethan said, voice distant. Now I'm not so sure. Marla sat beside him, cross-legged on the floor. Who was he? She asked. He ran a repair shop in Joliet, worked with his hands, built things, taught me how to take apart a car before I could drive one. He died when I was in my first year at Harvard. Marla glanced at the photo again. He does. Looks proud of you. He wouldn't be proud of the man I became. Maybe, but he might be proud of who you're trying to be. They didn't speak again for a long time, but the distance between them shrank. It was a week later when Marla asked him casually over breakfast, Do you still think about the bet? Ethan paused mid-sip. Every day, she raised an eyebrow. Not because of the terms, he added, but because it forced me to look in the mirror. And I didn't like what I saw. But now, I'm trying to become someone I wouldn't be ashamed to see looking back. Marla studied him for a moment, then she said the last thing he expected. I've been thinking too. He set his mug down. You've done a lot to change, more than I thought you would. But I need to know something. Anything. If you had never made that bet, if there was no money, no challenge, just me as I am, would you have ever noticed me? He opened his mouth, closed it, then said, honestly, not then, but now, I can't unsee you. Marla nodded. Good. Because I don't ever want to be invisible again. You won't be, he said. Not if I have anything to do with it. She looked at him for a long beat. And then, slowly, her hand reached across the counter. Her fingers brushed his, not a grand gesture, but forgiveness doesn't arrive in thunder. It arrives in moments like this, silent, hesitant, real. The 6-month deadline arrived quietly. No drama, no announcement, no reminder from Jack. Ethan knew. The date, by the way, the calendar stared at him like a dare. The morning air in the penthouse felt different. Not cold, just full of possibility. And risk. He found Marla in the kitchen, barefoot, in one of his old sweaters. She was making eggs, humming something soft, off-key. She looked peaceful. He wondered if she remembered the date, but he didn't ask. Instead, he set a small envelope on the kitchen island. No logo, no wax seal, just her name in his handwriting. She noticed it as she plated her food. What's this? She asked. The paperwork, he said. Termination clause, mutual dissolution. If you sign it, the marriage ends today. No strings, no press, just clean and quiet. Marla stared at it, then at him. You're serious? She asked. I am. Just like that? Ethan met her eyes. You don't owe me anything, least of all permanence. She picked up the envelope, turning it over in her hands. Her face was unreadable. I don't want to trap you in something that started wrong, he added. If you stay now, it has to be because you choose to. Marla set the envelope down. I've been waiting for this, she said. His chest tightened. I figured. She crossed her arms. Because I needed to know if you'd try to win me. Again, with words, with pressure, with guilt. I won't, he said. And now that you're not, I'm terrified, Ethan admitted. Because I finally want something that isn't about power, and I have no control over whether I get it. Marla walked around the island slowly, stopping in front of him. I hated you once, she said. I don't blame you. I wanted to break you. And I did, he nodded. Yeah. But you built something better after. Ethan looked at her, afraid to move, afraid to speak. "Do you love me?" she asked, direct as ever. "Yes," he said instantly. "I do. Entirely. Completely. Not because I won a bet, not because you challenged me, because you showed me how to be honest. And I don't want a life where you're not in it." Marla took a slow breath. Then she stepped forward. She slid the envelope off the counter and tore it in half. "You really thought I'd walk out in this sweater," she said with a faint smile. He blinked. "I wasn't going to stop you." "I know." She set the pieces of the contract aside. "But you finally understood something. That this wasn't about earning forgiveness or proving your worth. It was about becoming the kind of man who wouldn't need to prove it anymore." "I'm trying. You're doing," she said. He closed the distance between them, slowly, unsure until her hand found his. No kiss, no orchestral swell, just two, people choosing each other. They held a second wedding 2 months later. Small, real, a rented rooftop garden overlooking the lake. No paparazzi, no investors. Just a string quartet, warm lights and the smell of peonies in recycled glass jars. Chase officiated. Marla wore soft cream, her hair loose, her eyes steady. Ethan forgot his vows halfway through and just said what he meant. "I thought I needed to win everything to be someone, but I was never anything until I met you." Marla laughed, through tears, and pulled him in. It wasn't perfect, it was better. A year passed. The penthouse changed. Less marble, more wood. Fewer mirrors, more shelves. More dinners at the tiny, round table. More mornings with bitter coffee and quiet smiles. Ethan never looked at the stock ticker the same way again. He sold one division of Rourke Dynamics, funded 3 nonprofits, set up a new internal policy for all major decisions, human impact report required. Marla helped design it. They worked side by side sometimes, or opposite ends of the same room. Their rhythm wasn't flashy, it was quiet, earned, unshakable. One morning, Marla handed him a folded napkin. It said, "Doctor's appointment. Come if you can." Inside the clinic, she held his hand so tightly, his fingers tingled. On the screen, a flicker. A heartbeat. New life. Ethan had stared at millions of data points, closed billions in deals. Nothing felt like that moment. He kissed the back of her hand. Said nothing. She said, "Guess you'll have to learn how to swaddle now." He laughed, eyes wet. "I'll Google it." They named her June. After the month, they stopped pretending and started building. On her first birthday, they brought her to the library where Marla used to work. She toddled through the aisles, squealing, at shelves like they were treasure maps. A librarian smiled. "She's going to be a heartbreaker." Marla laughed. "Let's hope she breaks systems, not hearts." Ethan stood beside her, holding their daughter. A man once built on power, now steady with presence. "No more games," he whispered. Marla reached for his hand. "Just life."